Above all, stay alive. You have no idea how important you are. This is John Connor. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Ilamosai, gratitude for life. So there's a lot of information going around, a lot of videos pretty much showing how the God of the Old Testament is a bad guy and the God of the New Testament is a good guy. Now, there's a certain amount of truth to that. And the approach that I took coming into this was to point out that Yahweh is nothing more than Tahuti Habwi, and Yah in Psalm 68 is nothing more than Tahuti Yah. But there's a lot of moving pieces to this. Now let me ask you a question. The myth of Heru and Seth, is it just a myth? Did it have any physical manifestation? Was there any rule of Seth? Governed, which he ruled the place in chaos? Is it possible that we're under the rule of Seth? A lot of times I talk about these things and I mention certain things like Kali Yuga, the age of deceit and counterfeit. And I don't think a lot of people understand what I'm trying to say. So is this Kali Yuga thing, it's a Hindu word, quite obvious. These 4 yugas that reflects the golden age, the silver age, the bronze age, the iron age. Is it just a Hindu thing? Is this just something indigenous to the Hindu body of work? Well, look over into Greece. They have these 4 age as the age of the Titans, the age of the gods, the Olympians, the age of heroes, half men, half gods, and the age of man. So is any of this in your Bible? And why am I going through all this? Well, right in Daniel, where he discussed this image of Nebuchadnezzar, you see this reflected in the statue. Head of gold, chest of bronze, chest of silver, thighs of bronze, leg of iron. And right below the ankle it says, "For where thou sawest the miry clay mix with the iron, and cleave it not, so shall they mix their seed with man, but they will not cleave." That's a whole different topic by itself. That's suggesting that there are multiple different species on the planet. That's something I'd love to get into at a further date. But this is not about that. The reason I went into all that is, in the golden age, I think we lived for, 1,000 years. I think we operated more in our crown chakra, pineal gland, and we understood the full science of how we're connected to all divinity, to all creation, as a matter of fact. As we go down in the silver age, that decline a bit. As we go down in the bronze age, that decline a bit. The silver age probably have people not living 1,000 years, not firing off from the crown chakra from the pineal chakra. So by the time we reach down to the Kali Yuga cycle, you have different circumstances. I believe the constellation is set separately, is at a different setting than it was in the Golden Age and Silver Age, which would have the Earth vibrating at a different frequency. For example, our ancestors in Kemet says, if you were not here during the Golden Age, Zetepi, you will not be here during the next Zetepi, the Golden Age, because the science goes accordingly. During the Golden Age, those beings that the Bible call devils, jinn, during the Golden Age, Zetepi, they are not allowed on the planet.
Tell us why we should invest so heavily in that.
Survival. Survival of the species.
Do you think
No
eventually,
question about it.
You think eventually we'll colonize other planets and we'll leave?
Not in
Earth?
our solar system, because there's nothing here that will sustain us.
The Earth is vibrating at such a high frequency. You're eating out of gold spoon and chucking it out the window, because the stones that you're walking on the road, they're golden. They're gold. The Earth is producing X amount more golds and mineral. The constellation, you're closer to the Sirius, so you're feeding off the Sirius star, and which have everything to do with your vibration. So by the time we reach down now to the Iron Age, the Kali Yuga age, under the Golden Age, the devils are not allowed on the planet because the frequency is too high. During the Silver Age, the devils is allowed on the planet, but they're quarantined in a certain spot, like how they were quarantined in Europe for a very long time. During the Bronze Age, well, guess what? Now the devil is sharing continents with you. They're on the same land mass with you. During the Iron Age, the devil is in you. And I know everyone's going to say, I don't have no devil in me. Well, what do you think this 400 years of slave trading was about? All of us do have violence in our blood based on the slave masters raping the slaves. All right? So now, with that being said, my view is, on a spiritual level, you have a being of chaos running the system. That's exactly what your Bible tells you. The devil is the ruler of the world. All right? On a physical terms, in physical matter, the rulers of the earth becomes absolutely the lowest vibratory beings. As it says, and I see where wise and the righteous are thrown down, and evil and wicked has been viewed as righteous. Everything is inverted. All right? So, took me a long time to get to my point. So here's my thesis for the day. The God of the Bible is actually Seth, overlaid with Yah and Yahweh.
I, Seth, shall be your one. Gods, worship me or be enslaved. I, Seth, shall be your one. Gods, worship me or be enslaved. I, Set, shall be your one. Gods, worship me or be enslaved.
That's quite an interesting theory. Now, knowing that it goes against all the grain, against all common consensus. First thing we need to do is to analyze these two divinities in question. Tahuti Habwi. Is this a god of chaos? Is this a god of war? Tahuti Mahakir, he that has a true voice, is the god of wisdom. Tahuti Habwi, this is where we get the word Yahweh from. Tahuti Yah is where we get the word Yah from. Alright? He's actually the judge of the two combatants, a very impartial judge. A god of wisdom, a god of divinity, a god of writing. So when you study in this divinity back in its Kemetic settings, this is not a god of war. This is not a god of chaos. This is not a god of the desert. As a matter of fact, there was this myth that says Ra sent out Tahuti after his daughter to bring her back. So Tahuti transformed into a baboon. He catches up to her. She was enraged. She was about to smite him. And his response was something to this effect. And when you think of his response, you're not thinking of a god of war. You're thinking of a god of wisdom. His response was, fate punishes every crime. Now, if he was a god of war, he would have, stood back up and be ready to respond in kind. When you analyze the root of Yahweh, Tahuti Habwe, you're seeing that this is more like a god of wisdom, a god of divinity, a god of writing. All right? Back in Kemet, he was a high-ranking divinity. In the war between Heru and Seth, Isis called out and prayed to Tahuti. And when Tahuti came, Tahuti say, listen, you need to pray to Ra for help. So he's always using his wisdom. Up until this day, he is still the divinity that the high priests communicate with, whether within the Orisha setting as Orunmila, whether within the Akan setting as the Almighty Bre Kirikunawati. He is shown in the Judgment Stele and mentioned in the Book of the Dead, or correctly, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, as sealing up the forehead of the deceased, same as he's doing in Revelation. Now, when you analyze this divinity, this is what you're coming up with. You're not coming up with a god of war. You're not coming up with a god of storm. You're not coming up with a god of the desert. Pay attention, follow me. We're going somewhere. Now let's analyze Set. On the other hand, Set is a storm god, a god of chaos, a god of war, a god of the desert. As a matter of fact, it is said after the war with Heru and Set, Set escaped or was banished to the desert land of West Asia, where he was worshipped by the Canaanites as Baal.
To make Mesopotamia habitable, Enki reclaims the Nile Valley. The Sinai Peninsula is retained by the Anunnaki for a post-diluvial spaceport. A control center is established on Mount Moriah, the future Jerusalem. 9780 BC. Ra, Marduk, Enki's firstborn son, divides dominion over Egypt between Osiris and Seth. 9330 BC. Seth seizes and dismembers Osiris, assumes sole rule over the Nile Valley. 8970 BC. Horus avenges his father Osiris by launching the First Pyramid War. Seth escapes to Asia, seizes the Sinai Peninsula and Canaan. 8006.
Now, after the war, Ra assigned Heru the victor. Heru, this would be King Heru, translated as King Yao, translated as King So, King Hevioso, or King Shango the Sim. He became the ruler over the fertile land, and Set became the ruler over the barren land, over the desert. The most interesting thing is, when the Hyksos invaded Egypt, their main god in Avaris, where your Bible called Goshen, was Set. Set was their national god. And when they went back to Canaan, West Asia, they continue worshiping him under the new name Baal, the storm god, a god of war, a god of the desert. Where is West Asia? This is all desert. Now there's a huge connection between the Canaanites, the Israelites, and the Phoenicians. Okay? Now before I start to get to some conclusive points here, let me dance around the point for a little bit. How many times is it stated in the Old Testament, "For I am a God of war"? For I am a God of war. Again, the point that I'm looking to prove here is the God of the Bible is Set with an overlay of Yahweh. Of course, this is the Kali Yuga cycle. This is the age of deceit and counterfeit. Now, back in your New Testament, when the mythological Christ was going back and forth with the Pharisees, and he says, "For your father was a murderer in the beginning, and everything come out his mouth was lies." Who also was a murderer in the beginning? Set, who murdered his brother Osar. Another interesting thing is the Phoenicians, they identify the planet Saturn, but they call it Israel, an angel of death. And when you understand all the mythologies associated with Saturn, it falls right in line. Kronos, the Grim Reaper, and so forth. So now you have Set commanding his children in the Old Testament to go out and wipe out entire nations. Man, woman, children, just bring back the gold and bring back the virgin, because God needs the virgins and God needs the gold. Now, all of this is going to make perfect sense in a bit, because Set is a god of chaos, a god of the desert, a god of war. So it will make perfect sense for him to order these people to go around and commit genocide, countless genocide, as is recorded in the Old Testament. Now, how do I know that the God of the Bible is Set? And this is written with an overlay of Tahuti Habwi, aka Yahweh. So right in Deuteronomy 32, 8 to 10, it tells you, in the days when El divided up all the nations, He divided them up according to the sons of God. Now pay attention to these connections. Seth, when he murdered his brother, he had 72 conspirators. El, in the Canaanite religion, has, some say 70, some say 72 sons. But in Deuteronomy 32, 8 to 10, it tells you, on the day when El divided up the nations, he divided them up according to the sons of God. And each of these divinities pretty much got a nation to rule over. 72 nations for the 72 sons of El. And it says, Israel became the inheritance of the Lord, who was a God of the desert. That's Seth, not Yahweh. Yahweh is not a God of the desert. You've been told in your Bible that the ruler of this world is the devil. This is exactly what this is saying. So now it says, and the Lord said, let us go down and cause chaos or cause confusion to their languages. Genesis, Tower of Babel. For I am not a God of confusion. Okay, what's going on here? Both of these statements cannot be right. Cut. All right, so actually, the God of the Old Testament is Seth. And that is why the mythological Christ almost mocked him and never actually prayed to him, because he was actually coming from a myth of Heru, a composite divinity of Heru, King Heru, son of Osar, Oset. He's also coming from the myth of Osar, Lord of the Resurrection. And more importantly, he's coming from another Heru divinity, Heru Kyensu, Neffer Hotep, the beautiful one at rest. Well, Kyensu in the ancient Kemetic became Khonsu in Coptic Egyptian, and from Khonsu to Coptic Egyptian to Yesu in Greek.
Let us purify the souls of Cairo and then the world.
I cannot allow you to proceed.
I'm here to bring balance.
You speak of balance, yet you choose him. Your avatar is a sinner.
You're jealous of his loyalty.
Loyalty at what cost? An empty world?
Oh, Khonsu, for a god, you are low on faith.
You'll never learn.
Tell me to spare you, and I will.
I choose obliteration over mercy.
Followers of Amit, judge everyone.
There's so little difference in what we want for this world.
I only punish those who have chosen evil.
So do I. Only I don't give them the satisfaction of committing it. Be at my side. Why fight, knowing you will fail?
Because it is my choice. The very thing you take away.
So in all reality, he was pushing more of a Heru vibes, coming back to take over from Seth, defeating Seth. So what is this myth all about? Seth killing Osar. Is there anything to this myth? Or is it just, stories? what we didn't understand was the myth of Hosar and Set.
I, Set, shall be your one. Gods, worship me or be enslaved.
Actually, we're living through this myth of being ruled under Set, under an age of chaos. Anybody could look in the world and see this. You don't need glasses. We're being ruled by the seed of a lesser spawn. So what is this myth about? Set killing Osar. Is it just a myth? Is there anything to it? Okay, let's analyze this for a little bit. Let's speak to this. Osar, the perfect black, the owner of all Eds, the real ruler, the first king, the ruler of the underworld, or Osiris, origin from the constellation Sar, or by the Greeks Orion, with his wife Set, Isis, from Sirius, representing the black-brown nations. Alright, so you describe what Osar represent. He was actually killed by Set and cut up into 14 or 13 pieces. His throne was usurped by Set, ruled over a period of a chaotic time. What does all this mean though? Osiris, the black nation, killed by Set and his followers, cut up into 14 pieces, sent to the underworld. Okay, so that's actually the fall of the Black Kingdom. After the Hyksos Asiatic invasion, it just all went downhill from there. The cutting up of Osar into many pieces, this is the cutting up of the black nation, divided and sent all over the world, and ruled over by Set and his followers.
How about two snakes coming together over a black sun? A magnificent standard.
The only snakes I know of are those of Set and those cursed towers. They have spread to every city. 2-3 years ago, it was just another snake cult. Now, everywhere. It is said that they are deceivers. They murder people in the night. I know nothing.
Okay, now, where it says his body was cut up, read back Psalms 2 again. Why do the enrage and the people imagine a vain things? False king have taken counsel against the Most High and against his anointed, saying, come, let us tear their bonds apart and throw their cords from among us. Alright, tear their bonds apart is the same thing as Osar, the head of your nation, being cut up into 14 pieces and scattered all over the world. Okay, so now today we have the rise of the Christ consciousness in the world that is within us, which is like Heru returning to battle Set, the Setians, the Satan, and to reclaim the crown, to reclaim the rightful place under the sun. This is the Christ consciousness, the mythological Christ, the Heru Kyensu. It's funny, in the New Testament, the mythological Christ never actually prayed to him. He kind of spoke disparagingly of him in terms of, listen, which one of you fathers, if your children was hungry, you would send serpents among them, and if they were thirsty, you would give them a rock. This is going back to their history in the Old Testament. And when he actually called out and prayed, he says, Eli, Eli. I'm not even going to try to say that word in Hebrew, but it says, Eli, Eli, why have thou forsaken me? And another thing too, he kept saying, is you've heard it says so and so, but I tell you so and so. So it's almost speaking disparagingly of him. So right off the back, I'm going back to my thesis. Seth is the God of the Bible overlaid with Yahweh. This is the Kali Yuga cycle, an age of deceit and counterfeit. We're not expect to get any truth out of this. We have to go inward for our truth.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
I, Seth, shall be your one. Gods, worship me or be enslaved!